Hey, welcome to Mooney Reads. My name is Beck, and today I wanted to do the Animal Crossing personality tag. Now, I know this video is again with the plain background. I'm holding my phone this time since last time I tried to make a tripod out of books, it didn't really work too well. Hopefully, I'll actually have some kind of setup within the next couple of weeks. I'll actually be moving in stuff at the beginning of next week. So hopefully my videos will be a little bit nicer to look at some point soon. But until then, this is what we have, and I was super excited about this tag. So I'll put the original Animal Crossing personality tag in the description. Each of the questions are book related, but they're all based off of different personality types and characters from Animal Crossing. Now in the original tag, there was just the questions about books. But I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about my Animal Crossing village too. So when we get to each personality type, I'm going to tell you which villagers I have that are that personality type, and I'm going to tell you which character under that personality type is my favorite. So we'll go ahead and get started. The first type is Peppy, and for that I actually don't have any Peppy villagers currently. Anakati was in my village, but then asked to leave, and I let her because I didn't dislike her, but she was kind of middle of the road. To be honest, there aren't a lot of Peppy villagers that really stick out to me as being super cute. I think Sprinkles might be my favorite, but I do kind of have a connection to Apple and Ketchup, but I think that's just because they were in my village when I played it on the Wii forever ago. The question that goes along with this personality type is a character from a book you'd feel peppy about moving into your Animal Crossing town. Now, the obvious answer here is Remus Lupin. I love him and will always love him. But if we're going by books that I've read more recently, I would say Charlie from Heartstopper. The next personality type that they go into is Uchi, or the big sister type. For that type, I have Hazel on my island, and my favorite Uchi character is probably Cherry. She is the emo GF that I've been looking for my whole life. The question that goes along with that is a book with a sibling relationship that you enjoy. For that, I'm going to go with Hannah and Ben's relationship from I Wish You All the Best. I'll explain their relationship a little bit. This technically isn't spoilery because it's everything basically that you learn from the cover of the book. So Hannah is initially sort of estranged from her family already, but Ben ends up coming out to their parents as non-binary and gets kicked out of the house. So they have to contact Hannah. So they honestly kind of have to learn about each other as Ben is staying at Hannah's house. And honestly, the way that Hannah handles Ben's coming out is really beautiful. This might be a tiny bit of a spoiler. It's a quote. So I personally wouldn't consider it a spoiler. But basically right after Ben comes out to Hannah, she asks them what their pronouns are. And it's a really simple thing and kind of an obvious question if you're kind of around LGBT people a whole lot. But it honestly made me cry. I was not expecting that sort of kind of validation from a family member, so it was super nice. So yeah, Hannah and Ben. The next personality type that is covered is Cranky. I only have one Cranky villager, and that is Kurt, who I'm currently trying to get to leave. Cranky villagers tend to not get along very well with normal villagers, and the normal villagers are my babies. So I don't really want any Cranky villagers, but if I had to have one, it'd either be Dobie or Fang. And the prompt for this personality type is a book that made you cranky. And for that, I'm going to go with Kings, Queens, and In-Betweens. I initially started reading this book thinking that I would really like it. It talks about drag culture. The main character is a gay woman of color, but honestly, there was so much of it that I just really didn't like. I've probably talked about it in another video. I definitely made a whole Instagram post about it. But the trans representation was just not it. That was tropey, and they really only served as like a plot device. And on top of that, there was no distinction between trans women and drag queens, which I found to be pretty problematic. And on top of that, there was a whole lot of the book that just made me feel super uncomfortable. The main character is underage. She's 17, sneaking into 18 and up places, drinking alcohol, having relationships with adults, and without telling them about her age in some of the cases. So that's just a big no for me. That made me feel cranky and gross. The next personality type on the list is normal, which I said before is my favorite. My normal villagers that I have right now are Sky, Ellie, and Molly. They're adorable, but Sky is probably my favorite, but that's probably only because I've had her for longer, plus she's adorable. My favorite normal villager outside of the ones that I have is probably Fauna. The prompt that we have for normal villagers is, what books can you always turn to for comfort? And for me, that's going to be fluffy, gay graphic novels, something that's quick and sweet. A lot of fan fiction can serve for this as well, especially if it's an established ship that I really love. Wolfstar or Remus Sirius is definitely that for me. There are certain fics that I go to that are just really nice, and even if they aren't fics that I'm used to, if they have tropes that I really like or kind of follow different headcanons that I'm interested in. For instance, one-shots that are like college AUs, where Remus is like an art student or a literature student. It's really perfect, honestly. Moving on, next we have Snooty. The Snooty villager that I have is Judy. My favorites, other than Judy, because I do like that she's a rainbow, or at least bisexual colors. But other than her, some of my favorite Snooty villagers would probably be either Diana or Freya. And the prompt that we have for Snooty is a book that you enjoyed that others didn't, or an unpopular book opinion. I wasn't really sure which thing I wanted to point out for this, especially because some of the opinions that I have that are like unpopular are about books that are popular that some people just really don't like. Like, I actually really enjoy John Green and I love Catcher in the Rye, but that's not necessarily an unpopular opinion. So the closest thing that I've got to that is that I think that Romeo and Juliet is good, but only if it's read as a satire or a comedy. If it's read just deadpan, what it is, it's kind of awful. But as a satire, it's pretty perfect. And I could actually go into detail on that, just because it connects with a lot of stuff that Shakespeare satirized and some of his other stuff, so it would be kind of realistic that it would be a satire. Not a comedy, because if you look at it in terms of what Shakespeare wrote, comedies have a specific type of ending, but that doesn't mean that a tragedy couldn't necessarily be a satire, I don't think. But moving on, we have Lazy. My lazy villager is Anchovy, but my favorite lazy villagers are either Wade or Bew. The prompt that we have for lazy villagers is a book that took you way too long to finish. There are honestly so many that could fit in here, because sometimes I just have a problem reading, sometimes a book just doesn't send me. Most of the Stephen King books I own, I started reading and stopped, so we could go with those. The Gilda stories I'm still in the middle of reading. It's been more than a month. It's kind of ridiculous. It's not even a bad book. I like it. It's just taking me forever. The same thing with Asada. I started reading it in like December and then just kind of stopped at some point. It was intense, which is why it was taking me so long, but I have no excuse for why I stopped. I was just being lazy, I suppose. The next villager type that we have is Smug. I have Shep and Klaus as Smug villagers on my island. I do think that I prefer Shep. I'm kind of indifferent about Klaus, other than he looks like a Roman, which is pretty cool. But my favorite Smug villager is Raymond, hands down. There are a lot of good Smug villagers, but Raymond is kind of top tier in general. The prompt that goes with the Smug villagers is a hyped book that you have zero interest in reading. And honestly, I could say kind of a lot of them. Really, there are a lot of really hyped series that I just don't really have an interest in, especially a lot of the super white and straight science fiction fantasy. Sci-fi and fantasy is interesting to me, but a lot of the same kind of redone stuff, or even if there's like a small, like slight deviation that makes it interesting, I just can't really get into it. The stuff that's kind of based off of other cultures is more interesting. And for me personally, I like stuff with more social commentary, which I find more in works by people of color and queer people, at least social commentary that I find kind of engaging. And in that same vein, romance, I just talked about absolutely loving gay fluffy stuff, but straight romances, I just have a really hard time with. It's what it is. So the next villager personality that we have is Jock. I currently have Flip on my island, though my favorite Jock is probably either Ed because of his hair or Leopold, mostly because he looks like a librarian. And the prompt for that is your bookish MVP, so something that just makes your reading experience really great. And for me, that would be having a cozy blanket or sweater, so being warm and comfortable. So that is it for the personality types, but there are bonus questions that go along with some of the characters that are there on the island for everyone, and I'm going to go ahead and answer those. The first is Tom Nook, and the question for that is, what are some of your auto-buy authors? Really, I honestly don't have enough money to auto-buy a bunch of new books. I tend to try to buy used books. It's also more like environmental and stuff like that. But there are at least two people that I could think that I would probably end up buying their books new, and that would be John Green and Angie Thomas. There are definitely other authors other than those two, but those were just the first that came to my mind. Next, we have Isabel, the most ambitious bookish goal of 2020 that you have. And for me, I don't really have any, like, I have some specific goals for 2020, but not really. I think starting this channel was pretty ambitious. I've been trying to do a lot of readathons, so I think that in general is sort of ambitious, especially compared to what my reading habits were before. Next we have the Able Sisters, a favorite recent book cover or cover by. And by cover by, I'm assuming that they meant a book that you sort of bought for the cover. And for that, I'm going to say The Deep and Dark Blue by Nikki Smith. The cover was the first thing that caught my eye. It was absolutely gorgeous. And then I read the back. And it's a trans story. It's a really interesting kind of fantasy-ish. To me, it sounded dystopian. It ended up being more like political intrigue than dystopian, but I really, really enjoyed the book. It's a graphic novel, so this art style is present throughout the whole book, and it's just really wonderful. Next, we have KK Slider. Do you listen to anything while you read? And if not, what do you use to kind of set the reading mood? Sometimes I do listen to music. I try to. Sometimes I can't concentrate very well with it, so silence is preferable, or if I'm sitting outside, sometimes listening to the birds is just nice. But sometimes I do intentionally set the mood of what I'm reading with music. Most recently, when I was reading Laura Jane Grace's memoir, I listened to Against Me. I tried to listen to the songs that the chapters were named after before reading each chapter, and then kind of listen to some Against Me as I was reading. I also listened to Against Me as I read Nevada. But a lot of the times lately I've been needing music without lyrics, and for that I've been sort of defaulting to some lyric-free synthwave playlists that I found on Spotify. And the final question that we have is based on Brewster, and that is, what is your drink of choice while reading? And for me, again, that depends. A lot of the times it's tea, but I also like coffee. So it just depends on what I'm feeling. So that is all for the Animal Crossing's personality tag. If you've read any of the books that I mentioned, let me know what you thought. If you're playing Animal Crossing, let me know who your villagers are or who your favorites are. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Bye.